On the day of my son's graduation party, my neighbor lied that our therapy dog bit her, got him taken by animal control, then said, "You people don't deserve anything special." My son cried for days, but her leaked security footage made it my turn to strike. The day my son graduated high school was supposed to be the happiest day of his life. Instead, it ended with an animal control truck parked in front of our house, red lights flashing, and my 16-year-old crying on the porch while officers carried away our golden retriever, Max. Max wasn't just a pet. He was a certified therapy dog. My son Tyler has severe anxiety and mild autism, and Max has been his shadow since he was 8. That dog has been through every meltdown, every panic attack, every hospital visit. He calmed him when meds didn't. He was family. The whole thing started around 5 p.m., right when guests were showing up for the backyard party. Balloons, barbecue, laughter. For once, things felt normal. Then I heard the shouting. It was coming from the fence line. My neighbor, Karen, yes, that's actually her name, was screaming at Max through the chain link. Max had wandered over near the fence to sniff a ball that had rolled into her yard. She was yelling, "Get that beast away from me." I tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't stop. Said Max lunged at her, said she was going to report it. I thought she was bluffing. She always made threats. She'd complained before about our noise, our ugly fence, even the fact that Tyler's friends parked in front of her house. But when the animal control officers showed up 2 hours later, I realized she wasn't bluffing. They said she'd reported that Max bit her, drew blood, claimed she had wounds. They said they had to take him for a 10-day observation. My protests didn't matter. We begged, pleaded, showed them his therapy certification, vet papers, his muzzle training record. Didn't matter. Tyler kept crying, saying, "He didn't bite anyone, Mom, he didn't." I believed him because I knew that dog. He never so much as growled at anyone. And then, as they loaded Max into the van, Karen stood in her driveway, arms folded, smirking. She said, "You people don't deserve anything special." I saw red. My husband had to hold me back. We filed a complaint the next day. But animal control said it was her word against ours. They had to follow protocol. Meanwhile, Karen started bragging around the neighborhood, saying, "Maybe now they'll learn to keep that beast under control." Tyler stopped eating. He wouldn't leave his room. I stayed up at night scrolling through security footage, trying to find something, anything, to prove Max didn't do it. And that's when I noticed something strange. Karen had cameras all over her property. She'd even boasted about them during her many HOA tirades. I remembered her saying once that she backed up everything to the cloud. So when, about a week later, I saw a Reddit thread pop up in a local group titled, "Crazy Neighbor Has Meltdown Over Fence Line Dispute, Caught on Camera," I clicked it. And there she was, Karen, screaming in her own yard. But it wasn't about us. It was something else, something much darker. And buried in the comments, someone had posted a link to her leaked security feed archives, months worth of it. That's when I realized she recorded everything, including that day. And if she was stupid enough to lie about Max on record, then I was going to find it. Because if the footage existed, and if I could get my hands on it, she wasn't just going to lose her fake reputation. She was going to lose everything. We'd lived in Columbus, Ohio for 10 years when Max came into our lives. Tyler was 8, small for his age and already wrapped tight around his own anxious world. School was a minefield. Loud classrooms, surprise tests, the cruelty of kids who didn't understand a body that doesn't move the way other bodies do. The first year I saw him curled under a desk, fingers pressed to his temples, I knew we needed help that pills couldn't give. A local nonprofit paired us with Max, a golden retriever with soft eyes and a stupid, persistent wag. The trainer told us what I already felt in my bones. Some children need steady, living pressure next to them, a heartbeat they can count. Max slept with Tyler. He learned to nudge a panic attack away with his nose, to climb into bed when nights got loud in Tyler's head. He was certified, licensed, vaccinated, and the damnedest decent dog you could meet. He was our scaffolding. Karen moved in next door 5 years before the graduation. She was in her early 50s, single, a retired paralegal who walked like she owned the sidewalk. She'd been friendly at first, friendly in the way people are when they want something. She liked the neatness of our lawn, the way I trimmed the hedge, the fact that Tyler's therapy appointments were scheduled and orderly. Then she didn't. Complaints started small. Leaves in her yard, our fence sagging, Tyler's friends parking on the curb. She'd march over with a list and a look that meant, I will make this about you. She'd always had cameras. Garden bag mounted, porch mounted, a little dome that followed the driveway like an eye. She bragged about her system at a neighborhood meeting once, how it kept everyone honest. People laughed and nodded. I remember thinking, vaguely, that she was theatrical, the kind of person who weaponizes vigilance. At the time, I chalked it up to an eccentric hobby. You know, suburban paranoia. There were whispered things about her at the HOA meetings. Karen had fought with people over paint colors, hauled neighbors to small claims court for damages, and once demanded the city trim a tree because a bird had nested on her side of the fence. She kept receipts for every interaction, she said. I started to avoid her because my tolerance for pitched moral superiority was low. Tyler, who reads expression in tiny increments, learned to stay out of sight whenever she prowled. What I never expected was that she'd weaponize one of the only things that made Tyler functional. She knew, everyone in the cul-de-sac knew, that Max was special. She'd watched him calm Tyler at soccer practice, seen the way Tyler's shoulders dropped when the dog leaned against him. Maybe she was jealous. Maybe she was angry about something I couldn't see yet. She made small jabs. You're lucky he's so obedient, she'd say, like luck was a choice. Not everyone deserves an advantage. The tone always landed like an accusation. We tried to keep things cordial. I waved. She waved back with a clipped, tight-handed motion that never reached her eyes. We filed minor complaints, answered HOA letters, kept Max leashed on walks. But the distance between neighbors got wider, carved deeper by small slights. When Max was taken, I think what hurt most was the speed of it, the way all our careful paperwork, the vet visits, the therapy logs, dissolved beneath someone else's single bleeding claim. It wasn't just that Max was gone. It was that everything we had built to keep Tyler safe could be erased by someone who decided we were too special. So when I found the linked archive of Karen's security feed, months of footage spilled open like a stupid, terrible gift, I sat at my kitchen table with my hands shaking. I had no idea what I'd find. I only knew she recorded everything. The video archive was a mess, thousands of clips with timestamps, some labeled, most not. Her cameras captured everything. Her driveway, her backyard, even the strip of fence that bordered our property. The kind of surveillance that screams control freak. I spent the next 2 nights going through them. It felt wrong, I won't lie. Like breaking into someone's house and reading their diary. But after what she did to Max, I didn't care. At first, it was boring. She recorded herself gardening, hosing down her patio, talking on the phone, smoking on her porch in that stiff, perfect posture of hers. Hours of nothing. Then, around the 5 p.m. mark on the day of Tyler's graduation party, I saw it. There was Max on our side of the fence, tail wagging, sniffing near the grass line. Karen walked into frame carrying a gardening tool. She stopped, looked straight at the dog, and stepped forward. And then she swung. She actually hit the fence with the rake, hard enough that Max jumped back. You could see it, he didn't even bark. Just flinched and trotted back toward the yard. Then she did the most infuriating thing I've ever seen in my life. She turned toward her camera, grabbed her arm, and pretended to get bitten. She acted it out. She pressed her fingers into her skin, then dragged her nails down her forearm, drew her own blood. The timestamp was exact. I froze. My stomach turned. I kept replaying it, over and over, trying to make sense of it. There was no bite, no lunge, just a woman deliberately staging an attack. It took everything in me not to wake my husband up right then and there. Instead, I sat in the dark, staring at her smug little smirk in that grainy video, and I whispered, "You're done." But the more I dug through those files, the stranger it got. There were clips she clearly didn't know she'd uploaded, stuff that had nothing to do with us. Private moments, people coming and going, late-night visitors. Some of them were off. Men I didn't recognize walking into her backyard. Packages being dropped off behind her shed, not at her door. A few of the clips were deleted halfway through, as if someone had stopped recording suddenly. And then there were the folders labeled with people's names, neighbors, HOA board members, even the mailman. She had separate recordings for everyone on the street. She was cataloging us, every single one of us. That's when I realized this wasn't about Max. Not really. This woman had a long game, and she was used to getting away with it. But she made one mistake. This time, she heard a kid. By the next morning, I had copies of every clip saved on a flash drive. I called the animal control officer handling our case and told him I had video evidence proving her report was a lie. He sounded skeptical until I mentioned the footage showed her self-inflicting the bite. He told me to bring it in. And for the first time since the party, I felt something I hadn't in days: hope. But I had no idea that taking that footage to the authorities would uncover something way bigger than a false bite report. Because once they started looking closer at Karen's videos, they didn't just find her lies. They found something illegal. And that's when everything spiraled. I brought the flash drive to animal control on Monday morning. The officer, young guy named Mayers, sat me down in a small office with fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I showed him the video. Karen swinging the rake, pretending to get bit, clawing her own arm. He watched it twice, didn't say a word, then he leaned back in his chair and muttered, "Jesus Christ." He called his supervisor in. They copied the files, took my statement, and told me to sit tight. 2 days later, I got a call from an investigator, not animal control this time, but from the county sheriff's department. That's when I knew this was no longer just about my dog. When the detective came by, he asked how I got the footage. I told him it had been leaked online. He nodded like that wasn't news to him. Apparently, a ton of people had already found parts of it. Karen's security cloud had been hacked. Her entire feed had been exposed to the public for nearly a week before she managed to lock it down. But the sheriff wasn't there about the bite video. He was there because, according to him, something much darker was on those files. He said, "Ma'am, are you aware your neighbor was recording inside people's houses?" I thought he was joking. I said, "That's impossible. How?" He showed me screenshots they'd pulled from her system. One was of our front porch, but angled through the slats in the fence, as if she'd mounted a micro camera there. Another was of a different neighbor's living room through a half-open curtain. It made my skin crawl. Apparently, she'd placed tiny Wi-Fi cameras all over the neighborhood, hidden in birdhouses, on lamp posts, even inside her decorative rocks. They weren't just watching her property, they were watching us. She'd been running her own private surveillance operation for years, and it didn't stop there. She'd been selling access to some of the live feeds on an encrypted website. Hidden, subscription-based, thousands of views. The footage of us, our kids, our homes, our backyards, had been viewed by strangers all over the internet. That was the first real twist of the knife. Because suddenly, the lie about Max didn't even feel like the worst part. It felt like she'd stripped away every ounce of safety we'd ever had in our own home. When they searched her property, they found 5 external hard drives filled with recordings labeled by address. Ours was one of them. She had notes, literal files on our routines. Boy autistic, dog trained. Mother home midday. Father works long hours. Like we were data points. I can't describe what it felt like reading that. Violation doesn't cover it. Within 48 hours, she was arrested for unlawful surveillance, privacy invasion, and falsifying a report to law enforcement. The police told us the bite incident was the least of her charges. When Tyler heard she was in custody, he didn't celebrate. He just whispered, "Can Max come home now?" It broke me. We got him back 3 days later. He came running out of the kennel like nothing had happened, tail wagging, tongue out, forgiving the world that had just caged him. I wanted to feel peace, but I didn't, because Karen wasn't the type to fold quietly. Even from her cell, she was making phone calls, complaints, threats. She claimed I was the one who hacked her cameras. And then, just when I thought things couldn't get worse, someone slipped an envelope under our front door. No return address. No stamp. Inside was a printed photo, grainy, taken from a distance, of Tyler playing with Max in the backyard. And written across the bottom in black Sharpie were 4 words, "You'll lose him again." I stared at that photo for a long time. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. It wasn't just the picture, it was what it meant. Karen was out. Someone had helped her, or she'd already started working her next move from the inside. I drove straight to the sheriff's office with the photo in a Ziploc bag. The deputy on duty looked at it and frowned. "This looks like one of her angles," he said quietly. "Same grain, same timestamp format. She's not supposed to have access to any of that equipment." He promised to escalate it. But I knew what that meant. Weeks of bureaucracy, evidence reviews, maybe a restraining order that did nothing to stop the fear creeping under my skin. That night, I sat on the couch while Tyler slept with Max curled up beside him, and I made a decision. I wasn't waiting for the system to fix this. Not this time. Karen had used our own privacy against us. I was going to use hers. I still had a backup copy of her leaked footage. The public links were gone now, but I'd saved everything. The weird visitors, the hidden cameras, even her late-night conversations with people she thought no one could hear. I started combing through them again, but this time, I wasn't looking for proof of her crimes. I was looking for leverage, and I found it. There were clips of her meeting with a man she called Roy. Middle-aged, wiry, nervous. They'd meet in her backyard around 2 a.m., exchange envelopes, whisper about records, payouts, and keeping it quiet. I couldn't make out everything, but one phrase stuck out like a flashing sign. It all ties back to the HOA accounts. She wasn't just spying on people. She was blackmailing them. Neighbors, board members, city employees, she had footage on all of them. And she was using it to make money. That's when the real plan started forming. I reached out to one of the younger HOA board members, Jard, a tech guy who'd always been polite to Tyler and hated Karen's power trips. I told him everything. Showed him the footage. He didn't even hesitate. She's been controlling people for years, he said. Half the board only votes her way because she's got dirt on them. He offered to help. Together, we built a quiet little bomb, digital, legal, and precise. We compiled a dossier, timestamps, recordings, transaction screenshots, her meetings with Roy. We traced one payment chain to an offshore account under her name. Jard had a friend in local news, someone who specialized in exposing corruption. We didn't just want her arrested again, we wanted her exposed. Every dirty trick, every secret, every neighbor she'd manipulated. But I wasn't done yet. That night I walked to her house. It was dark and empty. She was out on bail, probably hiding somewhere. I dropped a manila envelope through her mail slot. Inside was a single printed frame from her own camera footage, her faking the dog bite, and a note that said, "You recorded everything." So did I. Then I went home, sat in the dark kitchen, and waited for the news to break. Because once that footage hit the press, every mask she'd ever worn would burn off in public. But what I didn't expect, what I couldn't have known, was that Roy wasn't just some sketchy friend. He was the one who'd hacked her system, and he was about to turn the tables on both of us. The exposé went live on a Wednesday morning. Headline on Channel 10 read, "Local woman accused of spying on neighbors, extortion through HOA blackmail." They showed screenshots from the footage, blurred faces, audio transcripts, everything. Our whole street was buzzing by noon. Karen's name was everywhere. My phone lit up with messages from neighbors, shock, anger, relief. It should have felt like victory, but I couldn't shake this pit in my stomach. Something about how easy it had all come together. That night, Jard called. His voice was tight. "Hey, you need to come over, now." When I got to his house, he had his laptop open, pale blue light across his face. "Remember that guy, Roy?" he said. I ran a reverse lookup on his number from the video. He's not just some contact, he's a contractor. Cybersecurity, works freelance for law enforcement. And guess who hired him 6 months ago? He turned the screen toward me, the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. I felt my throat go dry. "You're saying she was working with them?" He shook his head. "Not officially. Looks like she was their informant." It hit me like a freight train. Karen wasn't just spying for herself, she'd been feeding information to local authorities, probably about zoning violations, drug activity, tax evasion, anything she could scrape up from her footage. It's why she'd gotten away with so much. She wasn't untouchable by luck, she was protected. And Roy, he wasn't her partner in crime, he was her handler. Which meant when I used his footage to expose her, I hadn't just burned her. I'd burned him too. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls and a voicemail from an unknown number. A distorted male voice said, "You should have left it alone. You think you're clean. Check your son's school account." I ran to my laptop, logged into Tyler's school portal. There was an anonymous report filed that morning, accusing him of aggressive behavior toward staff. Completely false. But it was enough to trigger a wellness review. Somebody was trying to make us look unstable again. I called the school immediately, explained everything, sent them the video evidence clearing Max's name, the news article, everything. They paused the report, thankfully. But it was clear. Someone wanted to drag us through hell. 2 days later, Jard called again. "You need to see this." A new video had surfaced online, same leak channels that once exposed Karen. Only this time it was our house, our backyard, our porch. Me and Tyler eating dinner with Max. The caption said, "Guess they like being watched too." That's when I understood. Roy still had access to her system. He'd turned her surveillance network into his own. And worse, he'd flipped the narrative. Online, people were now accusing me of being the hacker who broke into Karen's feed. Some even said I'd fabricated the video to frame her. Karen disappeared, vanished, her bail revoked, her phone disconnected. Roy, though, he was out there, watching. And I realized then, if he could use her cameras to destroy us, maybe I could use them to destroy him. Because Karen wasn't the only one who'd recorded everything. Roy had too. And buried somewhere in that mountain of footage, I knew there had to be a file that showed who he really was, and what he'd done. So I started digging again. But this time, I wasn't just looking for proof. I was hunting. I didn't sleep for 2 days. I sat hunched over the kitchen table, the glow of my laptop the only light in the room, cycling through folder after folder of Karen's recordings. Every file name, every timestamp, every flicker of static, it all had Roy's fingerprints on it now. I finally found the folder marked Roy Private, hidden behind 3 layers of encryption, disguised as routine neighborhood footage. When I broke through, what I saw made my stomach twist. It wasn't just blackmail. It wasn't just spying. It was research. There were files labeled behavioral response children, domestic triggers, fear conditioning. Each one contained hours of footage of neighbors being manipulated, alarms triggered remotely, motion lights flashing in the night, automated messages blaring from smart speakers. Families arguing, dogs barking, children crying. Roy had been studying us. He was using Karen and her surveillance system to run experiments. I opened a document titled Control Group, Cedar Court Test Phase 3. It read like something out of a nightmare. Objective: measure escalation thresholds in suburban households when exposed to prolonged digital interference and targeted rumor campaigns. Subject focus: families with emotional dependencies, therapy animals, children with diagnosed anxiety. Controlled variable: public humiliation and systemic disbelief. My name was on the list, so was Tyler's. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. Karen hadn't hated us for our dog or our fence or our noise. She'd picked us because we fit the profile. Vulnerable, emotional, the kind of family that would unravel in public if pushed hard enough. Roy was collecting data on how far a person could be pushed before they broke. The worst part: the document was addressed to someone. At the bottom of the file, under recipient, was the logo of a private defense contractor I recognized from the news, a company that specialized in behavioral analytics for counterintelligence. Roy wasn't just a hacker or a handler. He was a paid contractor running psychological tests in real neighborhoods. Karen was his on-the-ground collaborator, feeding him data, filming reactions, pushing buttons. And we were their subjects. When I scrolled further, I found one more entry. My breath caught. Subject 9, Carter family, objective reached. Emotional destabilization achieved following canine seizure. Recommend final phase, fear reinforcement. Final phase. That photo, the one slid under our door, wasn't just a threat. It was part of the test. Every move they'd made, every accusation, every fake report, it was engineered. To make us lose control, to make us feel unsafe in our own home. And somewhere deep in that folder was one more file. A video. It showed Roy sitting in front of a desk, talking into the camera. Calm, focused. When you strip comfort from someone who believes they're safe, you see their true design. They stop being people, they become data. And data can be controlled. I closed the laptop. My hands were ice cold. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. This wasn't a neighbor feud. It was a science experiment, and I was about to end it. Once I understood what Roy and Karen had done, something inside me went completely still. Not rage, not fear. Just focus. They'd turned our lives into data points. I was going to turn theirs into evidence. I started with the files. Every single folder I'd copied, I encrypted and backed up across 3 different drives. One hidden at home, one mailed to my sister in Indiana, and one uploaded anonymously to a journalist who'd covered the first story about Karen. I sent her a short message. "You missed the real monster." Then I called Jard. He didn't even hesitate. We met at his office late one night and mapped it all out. How the system worked, who paid Roy, and how the HOA's database had been used as the perfect cover to store his experiments. Jard knew the tech side, I knew the timeline. Together, we pieced together something that couldn't be ignored, a blueprint for a local psychological operation being tested in a suburban neighborhood. But I wanted Roy to see it coming. I sent him an email from a burner account. Just one line, data cuts both ways. Attached was a 20-second clip of him sitting in his office, whispering into his mic about subject control. I didn't wait for a reply. The next morning, the journalist dropped the story. It spread faster than I could have imagined. Headline: Private contractor accused of using Ohio neighborhoods for covert psychological research. Roy's name was everywhere. The company denied everything, but within hours the FBI got involved. They raided his workspace, seized equipment, servers, phones. Karen, who'd gone into hiding in Kentucky, was picked up 2 days later. They didn't go down quietly. But it didn't matter. His footage, was undeniable. They had recorded themselves orchestrating fear. They'd turned people's pain into statistics. Tyler sat beside me when the news broke, Max's head on his lap. For the first time since that day in June, my son smiled. When reporters came to our street, neighbors started telling their own stories, how their alarms went off randomly, how their Wi-Fi cameras glitched at the same times every night. We weren't the only ones. Dozens of families came forward. Roy and Karen faced charges for unlawful surveillance, conspiracy, and data exploitation. The company that funded them folded within weeks. When the FBI asked me how I'd managed to get the footage, I told them the truth. Karen's paranoia had finally turned on her. She built her own trap, and Roy walked straight into it. 2 months later, I stood in the same backyard where it all started, the grill cold, the balloons long gone, the grass still scarred from the animal control van. Tyler tossed a tennis ball, and Max bounded after it, tail cutting the air like a flag of something we'd almost lost. I used to think revenge was about anger, about getting even. But standing there watching my son laugh again, I realized it wasn't. It was about taking back what they stole, the peace of knowing no one was watching anymore. When the ball rolled against the fence that once separated us from her yard, I picked it up, turned toward the house next door, now empty, for sale sign sun-faded, and whispered, "You wanted data. Here's one for you. The people you tried to break are still standing." And for the first time in months, it was quiet enough to hear Max breathe, quiet enough to feel safe again.